This video is a little more off the cuff than some of the prior ones I've done. I'm still deciding what to do as far as the format of these videos going forward. This one's a little less scripted. So if you haven't already seen my videos, I'm Michelle Troutman, and I create the myjourneytolove.com blog. And I'm talking about authentic dating there, essentially. And some of the influences on our dating habits over the years is what I've been covering in the past few blogs and videos. So in this video, I'm doing something a little different. I'm just going through and assessing what I learned when I wrote the blog that the last video was based on. And so that video went a little bit into my parents' relationship and its influence on me, especially how they met and what happened when I got into a relationship, expecting something similar to happen but getting different results. So it was kind of interesting how they met, and that's one of the reasons why my mother kept telling that story, especially toward the end of her life. Also, I think at that point she still loved my father and missed him deeply, even though it had been many years since he had passed away, sadly. So that was interesting, and also just going back and looking at the influences on my relationship patterns. That included a lot of media influences like fairy tale stories, romantic comedies, love songs, social media, even Western culture. Growing up in the US, there's certain pressures like feeling the need to get married by a certain age, which I address a little bit but not too much in the last video. So I learned a lot by watching movies based on fairy tales, like the Disney movies based on fairy tales like Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid. All very interesting to see how all those stories turned out. I enjoyed Sleeping Beauty the most, I think because the villain seemed more threatening, and also because it seemed like a more cohesive story. That, it seems to me, was the last one that Walt Disney was actually involved in before he passed away. So that one stood out also as very vibrant color-wise. I also enjoyed aspects of the other movies, but in some respects they were a little weaker, to me anyway. Romantic comedies are kind of a mixed bag. It's not a genre that I usually watch. I tend to avoid them because I think a lot of the times because my life has been kind of like the total opposite of a rom-com, so I'm more of a realist. I have trouble maybe also detaching the storylines and seeing them as fantasies, which is essentially what they are, because that's part of the genre, the predictability, apparently. We're supposed to be interested in watching those stories to see how the relationships unfold anyway. So there were a few that I liked. I liked watching Bridget Jones' Diary, mostly for the humor. I also liked some of the early ones, like Sherlock Jr. from 1924, starring Buster Keaton. That was a pleasant surprise. I would say it's kind of a mix of an action film and a romantic comedy, if there is much of a thing. Buster Keaton was kind of the Tom Cruise of his day. He did his own stunts, which was interesting. I think some of the filmmaking techniques as part of the storyline are innovative. Even now they stand out. I also liked, there was a bedroom comedy called Lover Come Back, starring Doris Day and Rock Hudson. That was funny because it was also a satire on the ad industry. They both worked for rival ad agencies, and I thought that was funny in some respects, even though it still shows its age in other ways, like the mores shown on film. I liked 500 Days of Summer because it lived up to its promise. I didn't quite believe the statement at the beginning that it wasn't a love story, but that somewhat turned out to be true, so that was a surprise. It was also interesting to see the character going through, the main character Tom, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, going through his own assessments of the influences on his beliefs about finding a one true love, like listening to sad British pop music, such as songs by the Smiths, and also a total misreading, as he put it, of the movie The Graduate. And I did see The Graduate, but I didn't mention it in the blog because I didn't really see it as a romantic comedy per se. It had some dramatic elements. And I had seen it years before, but I had almost totally forgotten the plot, except for the involvement of the older woman, younger man dynamic. But I think I kind of identified a little bit with the main character, Benjamin Braddock, because he was a graduate who felt overwhelmed and nervous. And there were some aspects of me when I had graduated from college as an adult, a few years older than that character, but I also identified because I feel like some of the stress that I went through at the time contributed to some bad decisions that I was making, including a relationship that I got into. So I could definitely see that, even though there was quite a difference in the years, time span-wise, in between. So that was interesting. And also just seeing how the movies had changed by 1967. By then in that movie, they showed a woman nude, full frontal nudity. The other movies I had seen, because they're mostly made under the Hays Code, were not like that, except for The Moon is Blue, which had a lot of talk about subjects like sex and virginity, but really was just talk. By the 1970s, it was a little refreshing to see more realistic portrayals of relationships, even in the romantic comedies, like Annie Hall and The Goodbye Girl. Obviously, by the late 1980s, the romantic comedy golden age reemerged, and they kind of fell back into the familiar patterns, mostly based on the It Happened One Night, which came out in 1934, and the opposites attract tropes and things like that. Beyond that, of course, love songs were an influence on me. I was really into a lot of the classic rock and pop, like songs by the Beatles. Those are kind of lovey-dovey in some respects, very romantic. Social media also influenced me as far as looking at highlight reels. That's one reason why I'm not on social media, at least on a personal basis, more for business. There are also other influences like on religion, and I went into some of that on me back in prior videos and blogs. So I hope that you'll check that blog out, and that you'll check out the video, which I'm linking to here, that was based on, and that it will help you along your own path to love. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. And if you want to check out the blog, I've got a link to that in the video description, along with the Am I Dating in Disguise test, which can help you assess your own dating patterns and whether you're dating authentically or not. And I hope that we'll see each other, so to speak, going forward. And if you like these videos, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.